What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. I'm Eli. This is my 2019 Audi SQ5, and today I'm going to be talking to you from the perspective of someone who previously owned the previous generation of this car and what you should know before you go and buy one of these guys. My old video, 5 Things I Hate About My SQ5, has 54,000 views. That means 54,000, or roughly that, many people wanted to know what I hated about that car. Now, if you watch that video, a lot of my complaints were super minor. Now, a lot of you have actually already asked me this question, which is hilarious. This is the biggest thing that's made an impact. The mirrors on the B9 are smaller and they are lower than the B8.5 SQ5. If you remember, that was my #1 complaint on the car. You could literally get pedestrians lost in the line of sight because the mirrors were so gigantic. Now, are these actually smaller? I don't know, but there's positioning on them where Audi has put them down and a little more to the left, where there's a gap that you can see through to see your local friendly pedestrian. Now, in the video, I also went on to complain about the seats, and that's one area that we should really focus on for the B9 versus the 8.5, because that's one area Audi really stepped it up. I talked a lot about the seats in the 5 Things I Hate video. The previous generation SQ5 had a 2-piece seat just like this, but my 2013 S4 had these sweet single-piece, almost like bucket style seats, and I was really wishing that Audi had put that into this car. Now, these seats I don't feel like are missing as much overall styling as you were when you stepped from the 8.5 S4 to the 8.5 SQ5, because I think they designed these really well. I mean, I've already mentioned the diamond stitch, but just the overall way that they put these seats together is a really, really nice package. It's really comfortable for road trips, and I've been really happy with them. So I haven't even thought about that bucket seat the way that I had in the previous generation SQ5. Now, one thing I do miss about the previous one is I had Alcantara seats in that one. This one is black leather, and if you know anything about hot days, Alcantara does not heat up nearly to the extent or retain heat the way that black leather does. Moving to the back, you can see I have this guy in here. Now, when I previously made this video complaining about the rear seat space, it was because we were using a rear-facing car seat. So the front seat had to be way, way forward. Like, your knees were basically touching the dash if you were sitting in the car. This car does not have much more room. There's not more length that they added to the B9. In fact, I would wager that they're almost the same length. I'll look it up, 1 second. A 2017 Audi SQ5 is 183 inches long. 2018 is 183.9 inches long. So there's 0.9 inches of difference in the total length of the car, and I can guarantee you that did not go to the back seat, because this back seat is still very small. Now, thankfully, my little man's in a forward-facing car seat now, so his legs can hang down, as opposed to having the car seat back that you really couldn't push back into. So if you need a little more room in the front seat, you can ask him to put his legs down. But compared to my S6, which was a much longer car, he had a ton of room in the back. Interesting to note, it's something that I forgot to mention in the previous video when I was talking about the rear seat space, there is more than enough room for an adult back there. It's just when you get the car seat in, you start to limit the angle of where people should be sitting, that you run into the overall restriction of space back there. So no problem. If you want to put 5 adults in this thing, you'll have 0 issues. It's only when you start getting the car seat involved, and especially big chunky car seats, that you run into the rear seat issues. Here's an interesting one for you. The question of, should you buy this generation SQ5 or should you buy the previous one? A hard argument to make for the B9 in some cases, an easy one in others. If you're looking at pure overall performance, if we take into account price, the previous generation SQ5 with about 50,000 miles at the time of me posting this video is between $32,000 to $35,000. This generation with about 50,000 miles is between $43,000 to $45,000. So you're carrying about a $10,000 premium to step up 1 year from a 2017 to a 2018. If you look in the 2019s or 2020s, that price goes up even further. If you had, let's say, $45,000 to buy a car, you could either buy this car completely stock, or you could buy a B8.5 SQ5. You could put it on coilovers for about, I'd say, $1,500. You could get a set of wheels and tires for it for, I don't know, $3,000, we'll say, so we're at $4,500. You could go dual pulley with a fuel pump, a heat exchanger, an intake, the JHM test pipes, the JHM baffled and catted down pipes, a tune, and a TCU tune for about I think the number I worked it out to was like 6,400 or like 6,800 or something like that. So you're now in an SQ5 that runs low 11-second passes on ethanol. The E40 file from Integrated Engineering went 11.3 at 119. It looks good because it's lowered and it's on wheels. And a car that like really rips and drives really well, or you're in a completely bone stock B9 SQ5. Now, which one are you gonna have more fun in? Unless you're just commuting. If you're doing anything else other than commuting, you're probably better off buying the 8.5 with that budget. With that said, I believe there's a lot more headroom in this car. And I say that because someone just went on the stock turbo with a fuel pump, E85, a downpipe, which I don't think adds any power on these, intercooler intake, etc. Someone just went 11.6, I believe. Now, my best time with all those mods that I mentioned before was 11.3. If we're looking for all-out speed, the B9 is probably a better generation to be exploring. And it's also probably worth noting that the people who are buying the B9 are going to be a different crowd than the people who are buying the B8.5 for the most part. I think at this point, the people who are buying the 8.5 are the people that are going to be spending that money on mods, and the people who are buying the B9s are a little bit more conservative and not necessarily willing to go as deep into the car right away. If you're making a pure value per dollar argument, the B8.5 takes the cake 9 times out of 10. Now, is this a nicer place to sit stock for stock? Probably. Does this ride way better because it has air ride? Yes, the B8.5 stock ride is abysmal, but remember, in that budget, we're doing coilovers and wheels, so you're solving your ride problem because you're going to put a nice set of coilovers on it, and those will ride mint. Stock for stock, where this car excels, and again, it's carrying a $10,000 premium, you can get the Sport package, which has the air ride and the Sport diff. The Sport diff and the air ride were both not options on the B8.5. You get the factory CarPlay, which I think is way more useful than people give it credit. I find myself using CarPlay almost every time, if not every time I'm in the car. The looks department, I'm kind of a toss-up on the two. I need to put a proper set of wheels on this and put a real rear bumper with real exhaust tips on it. And then I can really gauge it. But I've seen some really nice looking versions of these, and I've seen some really nice version lookings of the 8.5, so I think it's kind of a toss-up there. Now, would I go out and trade this car in for an 8.5 SQ5 tomorrow? The answer is no. One, because I've already experienced the B8.5 SQ5, but two, because I really like this car. I think it's a really nice package, and I have no reason to take a step back to the previous generation. But if you've never owned either of them, I would, and you're an enthusiast and you're planning on modifying it, it's a really hard argument to make right now for the B9 from a performance standpoint and a value per dollar standpoint. Now, what's the one major caveat to this video? It is that I haven't driven an 8.5 SQ5 or been in one since I sold mine. Other than my boy Ducky's, I drove it very briefly. So my memory of mine may be a little bit tainted by all the good times that I had in that car and how much I loved it. I could very much drive one tomorrow and say, wow, this car is leaps and bounds better, but based off of my memory of the car and how it feels, I would say they're both pretty similar. They both are fantastic all-around cars, and if you're set on buying a B9, this is a damn good car. You're not gonna have an issue with this car. But if you're torn on the idea of which generation SQ5 you want and you can get past not having the newest thing, the 8.5 SQ5 makes a lot of sense for the money. This, compared to a lot of other cars, the value per dollar, there it is again, is way higher. This is a freaking good car. But if you compare it to the previous generation, that's about $10,000 cheaper for the same car, I would say there's more value in the B8.5 SQ5. With that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about these two cars. My buddy Fernando picked one up. We're gonna tune his to stage 1, and we're gonna compare this stage 1 versus that one. We'll do some drag racing, we may do some Mexico runs, and we're gonna get the cars next to each other. I'm gonna give you guys a full walkthrough. But for the time being, I wanted to put this video out so that people who are shopping for a B9 have a little bit of information from an owner's perspective who's on both of those cars. Either way, whatever SQ5 you buy, you will not be disappointed. These are fantastic all-around cars, arguably some of the best in Audi's lineup for an all-around daily driver. And man, I just love this thing. I love this. I love my previous generation. I really love my S6, but it's a different kind of love. It's like a not practical love. This is like a you can get in it and drive it every day kind of love. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go out there and spread some positivity, and I will catch you guys in the next video. I'm out of here.